Hello everyone, I'm here with Artie Crocker, one of the 3 candidates running for the planning board this year. Artie, welcome to the Needham channel.
Thank you very much, Yuxiao. I appreciate it very much and the time that you spent doing this.
Great. Now, many people may have known you from the town meeting, but for people who are not quite familiar with you, just tell us a little bit about who you are.
I'm a father, grandfather, 2 beautiful granddaughters. I'm also the son of a father who grew up in town and the son of a mother who grew up in town. One thing I really love to do is I love woodworking, and I love making projects for my granddaughters. It's a blast. It's such a warm feeling. But I also love my position on the Conservation Commission. It means a lot to me. The advocacy of protecting our environment, protecting the wetlands means a lot to me. And I'm also a CPC meeting member. And so who I am, I'm an advocate for the community. I love the community I grew up in. I love the neighborhood I grew up in. I live in a neighborhood which has literally a short dead-end street which has like 10 kids on it. And when I look at those kids, I literally smile every time I pull out the road and I see any of those kids on the road. Mm-hmm. So who am I? That's a lot of who I am right there.
What's your understanding of the role of planning board?
Well, the planning board has kind of 2 aspects to it. One is there are existing bylaws, and then there are projects that come before the planning board, and they have to evaluate that project. How does it fit into the current bylaws and also fit into the bylaws specifically of that part of town? Because every part of town to some degree has different zoning laws to them and what can be built there. So one part is evaluating projects that come before the planning board. The other part is actually planning. You know, what is the vision of the community? And now the fact is that the planning board doesn't always have time to advocate that part of the community. But that's their job, though, really. Their job is to be an advocate for the community. Where do we see the vision? What can we do to make that happen? What can we do to actually we get enough input from the community so we understand what the community's vision is of what we want to be?
And what are some of the areas that you would like to focus on if you were elected?
I believe it's time we really have to have a focus on the environment. And I do not believe that's been there correctly on the planning board at this point. So we have the environmental issues as far as renewable energy, resiliency of our buildings, energy efficiencies of our buildings. We need to have a stronger proponent on the planning board for affordable housing. And we also have to have a big proponent for open communication. Whatever's going on in town, we have to reach out to every possible avenue we can to communicate with the population. The old ways of communicating, whether it be putting notices in the newspapers or notices on the town website, that isn't enough. And plus the fact that it simply doesn't work as well. We need to, whether it be door to door, putting leaflets in people's houses, in people's doors, if it's revolving a specific neighborhood. We need to have mailings to the town. We need to talk to any type of local group that's forming, which may be opposing it, but maybe in favor. We need to communicate with that group. And so that needs to be in a very early stage on projects before it gets to that 11th hour where it's perceived as the plan is the final plan. We need to start earlier to make sure we get the best project for the community.
There are some different views in the community regarding the timing of zoning changes. For example, the Muzzy Ford, some people may say that we probably should wait for developer who expressed interest and have some tangible proposals. Do you think the planning board should proactively initiate zoning changes or the other way?
There are multiple parts to this question, multiple ways of looking at this question. The basic answer is, should the planning board be proactive in how we're looking at the community and possible zoning changes? Answer is absolutely yes, without question. And they're doing that already, because we can't just let things happen. We have to have a vision of what we want to happen. As far as you brought up the Muzzy Ford property, as far as what was going on there was certainly controversy as far as, you know, are we doing, let's say, spot zoning for that particular property or properties, because there was Channel 5 in the Muzzy Ford property. Are we doing spot zoning? But the real issue was the property was being sold. What do we want to see go on there? And so I was in favor of doing something there, some zoning change to make sure that it went in the right direction as opposed to wrong direction. Where I differed in that particular project was that the communication aspect with the community. That's the main thing that was hitting me was, where is the communication with the population, with the neighborhood around there? Because even though I don't live around there, even though other parts of town don't live around there, there are people that do live around there. They're impacted by that. They need to be respected and considered. In the communication, it's a two-way street with the communication. So that's the problem I had really with that. Not the fact that something was changing. That was not the first thing, but the communication wasn't there. And then when the proposal did go to town meeting, it got voted down. And then what happened was there was word that it was going to come back with virtually no change to it. Just enough of a change to make, let's say, the legal requirement to bring it back. Then, so the neighborhood got wind of that, and they were not happy to sit, understandably, I think understandable. So they were pushing back. And so it took pushback after pushback to get the original proposal reduced 2 or 3 different iterations before it really hit the town meeting again the following spring, then was approved on. So that's where the communication comes into play, is that. I didn't think it had to be that contentious.
What is your vision for Needham in terms of zoning? When you propose zoning changes, what are your priorities?
One thing to start with is whatever we do propose, when it comes to, let's say, in this case, let's say business development, what impact is the environmental aspect of it? That's, for me, that's kind of one starting point, is where is the environmental aspect. But there are 2 parts to that. There's, what is environmentally happening within the building itself? What is its, let's say, carbon footprint, if you will? And then what is the green space around the building? Where is the property now? What green space exists? When a new building comes in, what green space will be left? Because the thing we have to understand is, once we remove that green space, it's gone. And the other vision is, let's be open, welcoming to the fact that developers in residential, we are all one community. And we all have to understand that we benefit from each other. What can we do is, the center of town, we could have some, a continued further push to have maybe some vertical housing going on in the center of town. There's already been some zoning changes for that, but can we push the owners of property to try to make that a reality? It's not always the easiest thing in the world, getting everyone to communicate, but it's the only way it's going to happen.
And another frequently brought up concerns and issues in town right now is affordable housing. And one of the driving force that's been pushing this housing price so high in Needham is because of the, part of the reason is because of the tear down activities. I'm curious about your thoughts. Do you think the board should propose some policies to slow down the tear down activities?
I would love it if there were less tear downs. That is not an easy thing to stop. It's simply not. I'm a big believer in having housing opportunities for elderly people when they're leaving their bigger house to go to a smaller house. I'm a big believer in the demographic diversity of our community. When people move into town, if the only house available to them is a $1.5 million house, that's the demographic that we're getting into town. There's nothing wrong with that. It's everyone's beautiful people as far as my neighbors. I love everyone that's around my community. But demographic diversity is what gives us our strength. Is that a direct answer to your question? No, it's not. But the fact remains is it would be nice to do something. What we can do is change the bylaws a little bit to give a little bit more possibility of more breathing space around the houses. That would shrink their footprint a little bit. Would it change the pricing much? The reality is probably not. But what we can do is we can make certain that any projects coming into the community have, if they're a development where we have some authority to them, we can make sure that enough of that is still affordable housing. Now, we do have some opportunities here in town. Being on the CPC committee or Community Preservation Committee, we decided that we're going to be a little bit more proactive, and we are going to put more of our resources and thought and time to seeking out low-income housing opportunities. And that's going on right now. With the Needham Housing Authority, they are bringing us proposals where we can give some, let's say, seed money. And that seed money would then bring large basically very large federal grant money into town to build more affordable housing, to rebuild affordable housing, to retrofit affordable housing. But it's a difficult thing. It is, but we can do better.
All right. I know you mentioned communications, but are there any other areas that you think you would have done differently than the current board?
Well, I believe it really does, again, boil down to communication. When they're proposing anything, make certain that what's being stated is as factually accurate as possible. Make sure that when something is being presented, let's say some of the cons are presented as well as some of the pros. Because I can speak for myself, when I'm being shown something by the town, the town, we're not a business. I don't want to be sold something. I want to be talked to, I want to be educated to. So I would like to see some of the cons as well as some of the pros. That way it helps me evaluate the whole process and understand the process that was going through. It's easier to have people get to where, let's say, they are, the planning board is, if they have some understanding of what's been gone through. The integrity of the process is key. Everyone has to, there's a lot of good people on the planning board. I'm on the CPC, Community Preservation Committee. I'm on the Conservation Commission. We take the process very seriously. I do not believe any planning board members, except for a few pointed factual questions in process or bylaws, I do not believe planning board members should be involved in any project with the developer out of the public's eye. Because right now that's allowed. Right? Right now that's a little bit of a standing operating procedure. Out of the public's eyes, planning board member or two, up to two, can take part in the project development. I do not believe that's the right thing to do, except for a couple of pointed questions on process and legality. Because sometimes a lot of money, a lot of times a lot of time can be saved by a few questions, but they're not supposed to be part of the developer's plan out of the public's eye. Only when it comes to the whole planning board by itself. Only then. That's a key part. That's a key part of the integrity of the process.
Right. So last question, what do you think sets you apart from the other candidates?
Well, some of what I said. I'm a Conservation Commission member. I've been a commissioner. I've been that for 10 plus years or so. I'm on the CPC, or Community Preservation Committee, as a representative from the Conservation Commission, who we look at process. We evaluate proposals, projects, speak to developers. I'm the co-president of New Year's Needham. I've been advocating for the community in many different circles for a long time, not just one. I've been advocating for years for the community. I've been willing to ask the questions. Excuse me. You have to be willing to ask the questions. And as someone who's been here for a very long time in our community, for almost 63 years now, there's nothing more important to me than basically, when it boils down to, is family, friends, neighbors, and our Needham community, period.
Great. All right, Artie, thank you so much for coming in and talking to me today. I wish you good luck on the election day.
Thank you much, Yuxiao. I appreciate it very much. Thank you. Take care.